Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matt. Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matt Peverell, and I'm joined by my usual co-host, as always, Mark Davison. He's back. Mark, how you going?
Yeah, good, man. It's a bit strange actually being here, isn't it? You've had a few guests on the previous week, so here I am, back to the future, 14 hours in front, 9 a.m. Big storm coming through Australia right now at the moment. So, yeah, I'm glad here to be back on BTSC and we can talk some football. How you been, Matty? What's going on? You've been holding down the ship a fair bit.
That's it, mate. That's it. We've had a few guests. We've had Jeff Hartman, the editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers that we're affiliated with. We've had Dave, the co-editor as well, with Jeff there. And then we've also had Jeffrey Benedict. It's on Curtain Call show with Michael Beck, and he writes for the website as well and knows all things film. So, yeah, it's been sort of, we had them in, and then, I had Jeff on, and then you were back, and then I had Dave and Jeffrey Benedict on last week. So it's just good to have my Aussie mate back, though,
Both.
Awesome.
Adios.
Marky, it's been a big couple of weeks. And it's only going to get bigger this week. And so I just, as we're seeing in the chat, you've got a regulars, Daredevil, Snowman, Brad Jewett, Big Bro Scobers in there, I should say. Ryan O'Toole's in there. What have you been feeling the last few weeks while you've been on the sidelines? Like, give us your take on what's been going on. Just while we're on the live chat, I was thinking just before we come on air, and every time that I'm not on air, I'm just the passenger watching the Steelers BTSC show. Just want to give you a huge thank you to everyone that comes in. We get 30, 40 people straight away who jump into the Steelers live chat, and we're ready to talk Steelers. We're ready to talk Big Ben and everyone else. So it's absolutely it's just so cool to see everyone come in straight away. On the Steelers standpoint, it's kind of like that old military army thing. What is it like? Hurry up and wait. You get all these things going, and then you sit there. So we're kind of in that bit now. There's been a few signings with Ray. Who else come back? BJ Finney, we've got him back. Marcus Allen. Marcus Allen's been redone. Apparently, while we were asleep, Robert Spillane's been given a tender as the exclusive rights free agent. Well, can I just say something as well? You get Brooke Pryor, the beat writer for ESPN, and no one's perfect. We make stacking mistakes, at different times. But you listen to stuff she says, and she just gets it wrong all the time, mate. She called him a restricted free agent for Spillane. How can you be the beat reporter with access to the team and make a mistake like that?
That'd be like me with the credentials. If I was wearing something like that, I'd probably just make things up on the spot, and then hopefully it would sound right.
you just come off as a funny one, though.
Wait, I didn't even know that, because I only woke up an hour ago, that Spillane was offered that. That's what's so funny about being here in Australia as well. And as our listeners know, that when we wake up, it's already 5 p.m. for people over in America, and the whole day has almost happened. So it's weird getting the news. We sleep in or we wake up 10, and then we've got half the day is already been completed. So that's in itself kind of funny for us. So when we see the big deals, and when I saw when James Harrison got cut, one of my favorite players, I was like, are you kidding? We have to stay up until 12 to 7, but that's never going to happen.
Well, but the funny thing is, right, so I record, for anyone that listens to the War Room podcast, which was previously Cap Room, so I record that on a Wednesday night in the future, and that goes live in the US in the sort of Wednesday evening time. But this week, I basically recorded the show as late as I could because I wondered whether there was going to be a cap number confirmed, and there was no cap number confirmed, right? So I recorded the show. I then wake up overnight, and whilst I was getting ready for work, they confirmed the cap number. So I quickly had to jump on and record a quick disclaimer, 30 seconds, while I was trying to run out the door to get to work to put that into the show, because we wanted to make sure that you guys knew when we were recording it, had everything in mind with the show that kept with the cap. But it relates back to what Mark was saying there. Because of this timeline, and we've talked about it before, while we're in the future, we kind of feel like we're a day in the past sometimes, because when we go to bed, the news is breaking for the start of the day in the US, and then by the time we've woken up, it's mid-afternoon, and it's just wow, we've got to play catch up. It's this really odd, time continuum, which goes back to, I guess, sort of the focus last week. But it is one of those fan nuances of being a fan down under.
Yeah, it's such a weird dynamic to be a part of, but there's nothing more, and I know you as well. Love it waking up at 3 a.m., 5 a.m. The better days at 10 a.m. in the early season to watch a football game. Yeah, it's nothing better than that.
That's it. But look, we wanted to get into the title of today's show, and I know there was a bit of a issue when I pasted that into the warning yet. But basically, the title of today's show is why Steeler fans have the right to be wary, for everyone out there on Facebook and YouTube, and for those listening back to the audio show. So I guess we're not going to be negative Nancy's or anything like it, but I guess what we're really conscious of, and when Mark and I have been chatting the past few weeks, and there is a lot to be optimistic about. The Steelers are starting to solve that cap challenge that they've got. They're bringing back players. They're looking at, what they can do in the draft. And we saw the Steelers at a bunch of different, colleges, this week doing some of that scouting and that draft preparation. But at the same time, fans, we haven't had a Super Bowl in over a decade. We haven't gone deep into the postseason. So we really wanted to sort of give you a forum, and we'll get to that in part 2. We're going to have most of that part very much Q&A, so get ready to ask a bunch of questions. We really want that to be back and forth and get through as many as possible, because we never end up getting through as many as we want to. But yeah, we just sort of were thinking about how Steelers fans, if you're out there and you're feeling a bit pessimistic, fair enough. We haven't necessarily got that Super Bowl, but at the same time, we've got to trust in this organization. So, Mark, let's get straight into it. Free agency. Steelers, only real move they made right now, apart from moving, restructuring some contracts, looking at potentially 1-year extensions on others. BJ Finney at the moment's only free agent, apart from picking up our exclusive rights free agents in Marcus Allen and Spillane there. What are you thinking so far? Rhino Tool in the chat right now from YouTube side saying, Jesse James could return, and we've seen a lot of chat about that. What are you thinking about what the Steelers are going to do?
I think they're just doing the bare necessary stuff, like signing these guys to 1 year deals. I think there's a lot of depth guys. Like I did like the play of, and you might have another view on this as well, the play with Marcus Allen last year. I thought he's turning into a bit of a short tackler. And he made some things on special teams and stuff like that. But I don't think the Steelers are a big team that runs out there and buys a massive free agent and wastes all their money, and next minute we're in the dirt for the next 5 years. I think they're just doing what they need to do at the moment. They're just signing players who they need to come in here, fill a role. Excuse me. Same time though, if we had this same season again as the last season and the year before, the 8-8, we go to the playoffs, and when we lose against the Jags, we lose against the Browns. There's got to be a point where, are you trending up or are you trending down?
Yeah.
Where is that point where, yes, Big Ben is he's awesome, and he's probably one of the best to play at QB for the Steelers, but mate, we love you, but can you win us 2 games in a row in the Super Bowl? Can you not be throwing those interceptions in the end zone, which every fan and us down here go, why did you throw that? Why? We know what you're like and how good you are, but you get to the 10-yard line, it's second and 7, and then you throw that pass to the tight end that's covered by 3 people and you picked off. And you shouldn't be doing it as a veteran player. And that's what we've come to see with the Steelers now. So this is kind of lingering on a little bit now. I think what the best case scenario is this sounds crazy for me to say, but is have a Super Bowl and then or have a deep run at least, and then if you win one, you've got a clean slate, and then we won't be talking about how we didn't get there for the last 10 years. We've actually won one. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I know we're all. Yeah, you can't just keep flatlining in the playoffs. Why? If we rest the guys before the playoffs in that week 17, has that worked? Maybe it hasn't. maybe we need to play that. Maybe we needed to beat the Browns so they didn't get into the playoffs.
And you bring up a good point. And I just want to, before Dave Shipley, our regular, jumps out, he says, great outside views. I love it. So hopefully, we are sort of meeting what some fans are thinking. But Dave, thank you for jumping in, even if you could only make it for a little bit. And thank you for the $2 in the tip jar there. But you're right, Mark. And look, as I said, we're not necessarily saying that all things are terrible or whatever. And and I bring up Chad on the Facebook chat as well. Because obviously we go to the YouTube guys a lot. It's good to bring up Chad's comments there. They have a little cap space unless they cut some players. There are a lot of different things that they can do in terms of creating cap space. The Steelers right now are 24th in terms of cap space there. I think they've got about off the top of my head, I think it's about $5 million right now with some of the moves that they've made. I don't know whether Robert Spillane's in that. That was based on over the cap. But, for instance, our draft pool right now, if we stay at every single pick that we've got, our draft pool is going to cost $8 million. So there are some moves you're going to see. I think in the next week you could see some, probably some extensions because they're in the last year of their contract with Nelson potentially or Hayden there. I would like to see the Steelers, and I know this challenges what some other, BTSC guys think about it, but I would be open to seeing the Steelers break their rule of extending guys with more than 1 year on their contract. I think in a situation like this, it's rare enough with the pandemic and the salary cap going down by 16 million that you consider it. But appreciate that would be quite landmark considering the Steelers have only just started using voidable years. But there is, Mark, obviously we talked there a little bit about those free agents. Do you think we're going to bring back Alville in a way, but do you think they're going to find a way to keep Juju? I've been able to ask this question of different people. I haven't been able to ask it of you necessarily, but I know you were talking before we went on air to me a little bit about Juju. What are your feelings around Juju at the moment? If we can afford him or if we have to cut someone to keep him?
If we're able to keep Juju, and this sounds very funny for me to say all the way on the other side of the world, but I think he's got to pull his head in. And that's one of our slang we've used before. The thing I find with this team and what is happening at the moment, maybe the last 2 or 3, maybe even 5 years, is we've lost a bit of our identity to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And the reason why we're massive fans on this platform, and for you and I talking about it, is where's the heart and soul of being a Pittsburgh Steeler? Now, I understand that it's money, it's a business, and that Juju is, a free agent like a lot of other blokes are. But I almost get to the sense as well, I actually saw him on the Twitch stream that he did where he was using other people's uniforms, and that's whatever, right? But when he was talking to the chat and he was like explaining things like, oh, will you follow me if I go to another team, like to other Steeler fans? And I thought to myself, I probably won't, mate. I follow the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that's something you need to buy into. Like I was saying to you before, these players need to buy into, and they've got a great opportunity. They're skillful players. They're good blokes, but they've got to buy into the program and become a Pittsburgh Steeler. Like I saw the interview with Dotson talking about Big Ben. He's ready to go. I'm so ready to see Dotson become a Steeler and hopefully a fan favorite for the next 10 years. Because you can see it in him. You can see it in the way he talks about the team. Whereas on the flip side, with Juju, yes, he's a free agent, and I understand that those rules and whatever he wants to do, fine. But he's like, oh, should I go and play with the Patriots? Who's in their division? Who can I beat? He's almost like playing like he is like a Madden player or a pro like that kind of guy. Whereas I think he needs to keep those ideas separate from being an NFL player and being a Twitch guy. He's putting them together. He's becoming more of a businessman, which is great. But sometimes as a Steeler fan, you don't want to see that. You just want to see Juju, if he is legit to become a Pittsburgh Steeler again, or when he was with the Steelers, just turn up and play. Turn up and play and play the best you can, and we'll cheer you on and we'll do whatever we can to support you. At the same time, he's like, should I go and play with the Chargers down there with Herbert? I don't care, mate. Do whatever you want to do, but why speculate so much?
Well, this is it. Like, I mean, and quite frankly, last year when I went, not last year, the year before when I went to the Bills game down there, like I got a color rush jersey, one of the limited ones with the Soen, numbers, whatever. They're not cheap. They're like $150 US a pop, right? And this week I'm researching because I love the number 19. It was my basketball number for a while when I was in high school. So, it was a number that I also had in rugby when I wasn't on the starting side. And so I love the number, but, I don't want to necessarily have to replace a jersey all the time. I've got quite a few now, but, I don't want Juju necessarily on the back of there because I'm not enjoying the attitude that he's bringing to the fore right now. So, and you're right, Mark, we did talk about this a couple of weeks ago when we said if he's going to stay, he's got to pull his head in, to use pull your head in, as we like to say down under. But, it is very interesting. There is going to be some things shaken up this season. And this is what I say, Steelers fans have a right to be wary because we haven't won. But at the same time, Steelers fans need to be a bit confident too, because we are a team that rarely has a losing record. We haven't had a losing record while Mike Tomlin's been around, but there's some work to do. So I think if we just have that in the back of our minds, it's going to make it very interesting. But I do want to also bring up the point before we get to bring back the question mark segment, which I think all the fans have missed. I know I've certainly missed it. I like being under that pressure cooker. But it's very much around the idea that, this is the fun side. And, a lot of the different BTSC shows, they've thanked you all for jumping in. And we agree, completely agree. Without listeners, there's no point us doing this show. Mark and I can just have a phone call or, meet up at the pub. It really, really makes it. So we really appreciate that. But also, this is a bit of fun. This is the off-season stuff. If we're not watching players, we can see how they're tooling up and we can let our imaginations run wild. And you can sit there right now and be hopeful about a bunch of players. The players you might want for the Steelers to sign Mark might be different to the ones I want, might be different to what Snowman and Ryan O'Toole want. The players that we want to be drafted are going to be very different between what Thaddeus wants and Ezra wants, or Dave Shipley. But that's the best bit. It'll all work itself out and we all get to jump into that hype over the next sort of, 6 to 8 weeks. And then we get to see them hit training camp and we get to, get the little insights and be hopeful. And then what do you know? The preseason will be around and we'll get to see some of the guys in action and then it will be the season. So as we say, we don't want anyone to be negative, but it's good to be thinking about what's working, what's not. What do we want changed from the last decade, as Mark said before? Because, is it all right to just coast along and make the playoffs but not do anything? And do we need to rest players in the 17th game? Because at the end of the day, we could have beaten the Browns and kicked them out of the tournament. If they were out of the tournament, we weren't going to get beat by them. So,
looking back at it, I did say, play the rest of your starters. But looking back at it, they could have easily put it to them and beat the Browns, and they wouldn't be in the playoffs for the 19th year in a row. So there are fundamental things I think this Steeler team is missing at the moment. However, at the same time, there is 32 teams. Sorry, 31. The Bengals never get there. The Bengals will never ever make the playoffs ever again. So there's 31 teams who have a chance to win the Super Bowl, and that's the glory of why we watch this sport, even to a certain fan aspect. Like when we see the game is the first game 0-0, and there's so many short games in the season, and you see that first pass and you see James Washington go for 10 yards, you're like, yes, you feel like that's part of you, that's your team, right? And this is where it needs to get to a point now where we have invested so much and we understand how we're fans, and now the Steelers are starting to be, I just think a little bit they're losing the identity of they have the solid defense, but where's the run? Where's the play action pass? Where's Big Ben being careful with the ball now? He's not as mobile anymore. He can't be throwing 4 interceptions. You just can't do that. So where's the point and where's our identity going to lay? And I love Tomlin, but is he the guy in the next 5 years? Is this the last year that we have a lot of these key players, Matty? Do we have Big Ben, Al, and all these key players, and that's it?
Well, that's it. And this is the thing that I think, and I do want to move on to the into the question mark segment. But I think I do want to quickly say something on that, and that is there is part of the fan base right now that are calling for massive change this year. They're not happy with Big Ben coming back, what have you. There's equally some people who are like, hang on, Big Ben's our franchise quarterback. There are guys here that are proven starters. Who else are you going to get? We can't afford anyone. We don't have, 17 draft picks like you did in the 70s, what have you, right? And I think realistically, there's somewhere falling in the middle because at some point we're going to have the change that some people want now and that this camp want and that this camp want to delay. And by doing that, I'm doing gestures. But I'm basically saying on the left, you've got the camp that, want lots of change now. And on the right, you've got people that want as least change as possible. And we're going to end up somewhere in the middle over the next season and a half, the way it's going to be spread out. So these are the things. And that's why I say you have a right to be wary. You have a right to be, hang on, we expect more. We expect more of the franchise. So that's what's going to be interesting to see play out. But look, let's jump into the question mark segment because I've missed it. So, Mark, do you want to give us a lowdown, a reminder of how this segment works?
Yeah. Basically, I just go into my my phone here and I go into the Google random number generator, and we do a number from 1 to 99, so we can get players like Mondo, which we haven't yet. If we do get a repeat of the last few weeks, I've written them down, so I won't do those players again. However, I just put Matty on the spot. We might get somebody super random, like Frank Webb in there. But no, he's not even playing. But we might get someone really random in there. And then we still have to talk about that position, that player. And I've got 3 questions for Matty and just see how we go. So are you ready, Matty? You ready to get
I'm ready. I'm pumped. I love this. I've missed this. I love this segment.
Are you ready for the practice squad guy that you're going to talk about?
Yeah, well, I had DeMarcus Christmas last time. So
yeah, true. Yeah, that's very true. All right. 77 off the top of your head before I look into the roster. Who's 77? He must be an O-line guy. We have a 77?
Is that Anthony Colvin? I don't think we have a 77.
He's soon to be your best mate. Yeah, we do. All right, Matty, here we go. So you've got John LeGlue. Have you heard of John LeGlue?
I can't paste my thoughts on him together. Sorry, that was bad.
We'll try our best. And this is where the segment jumps the shark, like in that, was it the Fonzie? But here we go. So John LeGlue is number 77, offensive tackle, 6'6", 1-year player. What was John's grade in 2020? This can be really fast.
I'm going to give him like a D because I don't remember. Did he even take the field? How many games did he play? I'm trying to pull him up.
I don't remember seeing this player playing at all.
I think wasn't he just hanging out in the practice squad? Has he ever played anything?
He was probably just talking to Barry on the sidelines. He wasn't doing that much.
Jeez. Yeah, no. Yeah, okay. Well, impact was zip. I don't remember anything. All right.
We'll do this really fast. So
I don't think he's ever played. I don't think he's ever played in the... Anyway, yeah, go on.
Yeah, what would his impact be for 2021? Well, we might need some backup with the offensive line. What do you think?
It's going to be limited now that they've brought Finney back. It's going to be limited because you're also going to have, there's going to be a bunch of guys they draft on this O-line and he won't make the roster.
Okay. And lastly, for the celebrity question, will this player make the Hall of Fame?
We got more chance of the Hall of Fame creating a greatest fan element of the Hall of Fame, and everyone in the live chat will get voted in.
Yeah, we should do that for BTSC. I even actually have thought that I'd like to do
a fan Hall of Fame.
Yeah, or even I'd like to do something to do with the podcasters and see who would play what position. That'd be kind of interesting. We've already got the power rankings, which Dave fell down because he pronounced Canberra. So I think I still think Big Brosco is number 1 at the moment.
I don't know. Jeffrey Benedict did a good showing up last week, so they could. That maybe we need to have a playoff. We have a.
I'll have to go back and revisit, but I think Dave fell down because a lot of the guys out there pronounce we don't pronounce it right. We just pronounce it Canberra, and he said Canberra, so he dropped down 3 spots. All right. So our next one got 77, John LeGlue. Probably wasn't our best stealer in 2020 or 2021. We have 84. Do we have? 84 used to be our mate. We haven't got 84 now, do we?
I don't think so.
Let me just double check.
I can see if they draft a wide receiver late in this draft, I can see someone picking up that 84.
Yeah, there's no 84. There's only one 84 we used to have, and we all know who that is. 50.
Mr. Gummy Richards.
Yeah, next one I've got 50, which is Shazier, which we haven't got.
No one's got that.
82. We haven't got 82.
Geez, you're doing well.
Well, you know who I just got then? 53, Marquise Pouncey. We didn't talk about Pouncey? Yeah, we'll talk about...
We can talk about Pouncey. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, we'll do Pouncey. Pouncey can be a second player. So we've got Marquise Pouncey at 53. What was his overall grade in 2020?
B+. Yeah. Did well, but made some errors there. I think he showed that it was his last year or two in the league. Yeah. Next question.
Okay. What's his impact now? It's obviously he's out. He's for 2021. He's gone skis. But going into that, will he? What is his chances for the Hall of Fame? I think
he does. He actually does make an impact, though, right? And his impact is yet to be judged. We're going to see that over the next year because number one is it gives the Steelers a chance to get fresh at that center position, right? And we'll see the impact of would it have been better to draft someone in a while back to replace him, or could we have convinced him to come back? But equally, the $8 million that he saves on the cap, how are we using that $8 million in resource? Now, I know it's different this year because the cap's gone down by 8%. It's gone down by 16 point, we're just under 16 million there. But at the same time, how we're using the roster and shaping the roster, we're going to see the impact of Pouncey, in 2021 in a way that you won't expect. In terms of the Hall of Fame, this is a great question. He was, I think he was a 9-time Pro Bowl, a couple of times All Pro. He didn't win that Super Bowl, but it's like what we talked about. I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks ago now, where we said the interesting thing about being a Steelers fan is because we've won 6 Super Bowls, it's very easy for us to go, well, if they didn't want a Super Bowl, they shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. But as I said at the time, there are a lot of teams that have never won a Super Bowl or that have won 1 or 2 and they won it, 20, 30 years ago, and they've got players that make the Hall of Fame. So I think this idea that you have to win a Super Bowl to make the Hall of Fame is something that we need to be a bit more open to the fact that that's not necessarily the case.
Right, because he's got the credentials of the last.
Got the credentials.
The 10 plus years. So you think he's going to make the Hall of Fame?
I think he's got a decent chance. I mean, he was part of the all-decade team as well, so you'd have to think he'd be pretty close.
And we're also going to. I think you're correct. I think we will miss his presence in that O-line. And how do you fill that void of a 10-year starter that's been there for so long? Big Ben's mate, and next minute we don't even know who we're going to have there at center. And center is probably one of the most important positions on the field when they're snapping the ball. All right, we're going to our third player. We'll count him as our second. What's the next number here? We have a 32, Matty?
32 is, good question.
I don't think we do.
No, I don't think we do. Maybe in the secondary?
No, we don't have a 32. How am I choosing all the numbers we don't
I'll give you a prediction. We'll have a 32. We'll have a 32 after the draft.
Oh, there you go. Fair call. It almost feels like we're playing bingo as well. Okay, so the next number is 38, which is
Jalen Samuels.
This is a really good one. I like this player. So Jalen Samuels, been there a few years. What was his grade in 2020? What was his overall play?
C. And the reason I'm not going lower than a C is I don't feel they necessarily went to him enough. I thought that he was expendable. When we kicked off the season, I thought he's someone you could even trade and try and get a 6 for or someone like that. It's also when you come to Jalen Samuels, he's someone you could find a bit of roster room there. I think it's between 800,000 and $1 million there this season. However, and this is what I caution, and I talked about this a little bit with Jeffrey Benedict last week when we're talking about Matt Canada. And that's Matt Canada has experience with Jalen Samuels from NC State. He used Jalen Samuels in an H-back role that was very much where Jalen Samuels sort of fit. So I think if he does make this roster, Steelers fans need to be open that we might actually see a bit more from Jalen Samuels this year, particularly if you think about that tight end room. If they draft someone in or they bring in a vet, if they decide they need to cut Eric Ebron or, given his contract number or what have you, Jalen Samuels could provide more than meets the eye right now. He's been around the team. I think when he came in as well, I personally, even though he had that H-back experience, questioned some of his blocking. You need to ask probably, Jeffrey there or KT Smith or even Dave Schofield in terms of whether they think that's improved or not. My gut feel is that it has. And I also think he had to get used to the way Ben sort of likes to use people out of the backfield there in the passing game. So I'd be really interested to see if we can get a full preseason. I'm really keen to see how they're going to use Jalen Samuels in this Matt Canada offense.
I think I'd like to see him play 12 to 16 snaps that are relevant as well. 3rd down and 3, scat back roll, fullback, misdirection, things like that. I still think he's got some hands that he can use. I do like his ticker. I like his heart. I like how the way he plays the game and falls forward. He's got that under his belt. But yeah, I don't think he was used enough in 2020. And actually, a lot of players at the running back position weren't really used enough. We did have more of a passing attack last year.
Well, and I think the other thing about it as well is that you saw, and I mean, there was that pass there to Anthony McFarland as well there in against the Browns at the end there on that 4th and 11 or whatever it was, and they ended up not, he just wasn't there and the ball missed, but like you saw McFarland take a few different elements of the offense that Jalen Samuels had kind of been slotted in before that. Now, obviously, McFarland offers a lot of pace. I mean, I don't know how many shows we did, Mark, during the season when we were just the audio side, where we kept talking about wanting to watch McFarland break it for a long one, and it never really happened. So, yeah, I think Mark Tobin brings it up as well there. Samuels provides a lot if you use him. This is the thing. We don't know, and this is why I say he gets a C, and I know that in the live chat, I think someone at No One You Know brought up a D. Like, I'm happy to give him a D, but I just don't think he necessarily was used in the right way, if that makes sense. I'd have to pull up his snap count there, but yeah, I just didn't get the feeling he got enough. I think he played 121 offensive snaps versus 362 in 2019 and 228 in 2018. So he just wasn't used.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you.
But preempt the Hall of Fame. I do not think that Jalen Samuels will be making the Hall of Fame.
You know what though? If I can give him a chance, he's probably a 5% chance. He's still been playing okay, but yeah, he would have to have a breakout season or 3 seasons or 4 seasons in a row. But he's almost now at the position where he needs to be used in the slot, in the the halfback, the fullback. Put him in there with Watt or put him in there with McFarland and see what would happen. That kind of role. But he would be figured out pretty easily. He couldn't be. Yeah, he's not a running back like Derrick Henry right now. All right, so we're going to our last player and see who we get, see what numbers we get, because we've got quite a few that's not even on the roster. 89. Do you know who 89 on tight end? That's McDonald, isn't it?
That was Vance McDonald, yeah.
Do you want to go on about McDonald?
Yeah, we'll do him, and then we'll do him before we move into part 2.
So what do you reckon about McDonald's? This is a funny question. So McDonald in 2020, what do you think his overall grade was? Similar thing to Jalen Samuels. I don't think he was used enough.
Well, he was still starting tight end. We talked about that with Jeffrey last week, which people thought it was Ebron, but McDonald started more games. I think McDonald, I agree with what Jeffrey said in last week's Steelers touchdown under. I think, I really think that, yeah, I just can't get away from the fact I think McDonald has injuries we don't know about, and I think he's very much like DeCastro in that he's a hard dude. He's a warrior. He's not going to disclose what he has. He's not going to make excuses about that. He had the COVID scare. I think he had COVID for a bit as well, and he was out with that, or he was implicated by that, if my memory doesn't serve me correctly. There, it's a hard one with his grade. I think. Probably No One You Know has given him a good one in the live chat of B-. I think anywhere in that B range, because he still started. I think it was 12 to 14 games there. So, yeah, it's a hard one with Vance because you see what he can do in that pass game, but blocking, you talk about tight ends a lot in terms of whether they block or they catch. And I feel Vance sort of fits in this middle slot. And obviously with the Steelers, we're fundamental that guys, need to be able to block. But I just don't know whether he ever did anything either super well. And I know Thaddeus is saying he's a good block and whatever, but for me, there are a lot of plays that I just sit there and I'm like, well, how did we work him well? Yeah, I'm gonna call it a B.
That's fair enough. Now, the impact for McDonald, he won't be there next year because he has retired. But what's the impact is similar to Pouncey. What happens at tight end? What do we do?
Well, this is it. So I think it's exactly the same as Pouncey, as you said there. It's who's in that tight end position now. What has that left for the locker room? Because if Vance was coming back, I think a lot of people would be sitting here going, do we cut Ebron for the cap number? But equally, Vance had a high cap number as well this season. There was $5 million to be saved there that went back into the cap. So that's sort of a question you get when it comes to Vance McDonald there. But, and No One You Know, as Mark's brought up No One You Know from YouTube, he did provide a stiff arm hurt around the world. I think I've shared this anecdote before, but when Vance did that stiff arm, I got notifications from, I think, 12 different apps and websites and whatever. My fiance texted me and she said, "Are you watching the Steelers game?" Apparently Vance has destroyed someone. It's hilarious. So, he did obviously have a strong impact over his career, just to, that cult figure. But when you look at the gap mark, it's allowed us to also get younger at the position and think about what we do at tight end, because I think, in fairness, and I've said this before in the BTSC Slack channel, since Heath, tight end's been a big question for the Steelers. There's no one ever that you're going to go year in, year out, yep, I rely on that person. So Vance kind of gives you the opportunity to go out and find that person potentially in this draft if the Steelers are willing to invest a high pick there. We're obviously not going to be able to pick Kyle Pitts, but I heard Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network talking about it this week, and he was saying that Pitts is potentially the overall best player in this draft. So, and there are a couple of other strong tight ends there in the second to fourth round. But yeah, in terms of Hall of Fame, I can't see Vance getting in there with what he did in his career. But maybe they need to carve out a role in that Hall of Honor for him at Heinz Field, that there's a cult figure, or a, best fend or palm, or as you like to say in the US, best stiff arm by a Steeler ever, the Steelers Stiff Arm Award or something. They can call it the Vance McDonald Award.
He won't make the Hall of Fame, but he was a good Steeler for us at the time. A good pickup from the San Fran 49ers, I believe. He came in at the right time. He played 3 or 4 years. He did really well for us. I think he will be missed. And he wasn't maybe used as much in the passing game, but it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of positions in this Steeler team that are like, what will happen? We just don't know with all these retirements and things like that.
Yep, that's it. But look, Steeler fans, that wraps up part 1 of this week's show. Steelers Touchdown Under, why fans should be wary. Join us for part 2. We're going to get into our usual sling and the slang. We're going to look at a couple of draft options, and we're going to take a lot of Q&A. So get your questions ready. So for those on the audio side, flick over to part 2. For everyone watching live now on YouTube and Facebook, stay tuned for a couple of seconds and we'll be right back. Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome back to Steelers Touchdown Under. I'm Matt Peverell, and I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Mark Davison. Well, not as always. You're back this week after having a week off. How's it feeling?
It feels great. And I just always admire how you say Steelers Touchdown Under. I never get to say it, so there we are. I'm on record now.
From next week, Mark, you can do the intros.
Mate, you've got it. You do a great job. You're over it. I'm just here to talk Steelers and to have a bit of fun. This is pretty much Matty's show. Matty's the one hosting it every week.
Well, you'll have your turn when I have a couple of odd weeks off coming up in the next couple of months. So with a few things, Mark, Sling and the Slang, it's been different the last fortnight as well. It's I've been able to try phrases with the guys. We're able to do a bit of Aussie trivia. Jeffrey sneaked in the fact that he'd watch a bunch of children's programs that were Aussie because he had an Aussie channel. So I don't know. I don't call that cheating. I call that extra education. But
how good was that? Round the twist, and that was a really, really weird TV show. There was one that there was like a fox that was hanging upside down in like an outhouse or a the Golden Throne kind of thing. That show was super strange, and there's probably a reason we shouldn't have watched it. But here we are. 100%, yeah. Down under. I'm going to go into mine straight away, Matty, but I'll make it quick because we do want to get some questions. So
yeah, that's it.
Mine this week is really short and simple, and I should have brought up ages ago, but it's schnitty. You know what a schnitty is, don't you?
A schnitty? Yeah, of course I know what a schnitty is. Yeah, palmy? What about a palmy?
Yeah, palmy, or we have, in Australia, we have like chicken schnitzel. We go to dinner, we have that. And when you go to the pub, you're thinking, oh, what am I going to eat? And sometimes you don't even need a menu. You just go, I just want to get a schnitty because every pub has that. When I was in America, I couldn't find one place. So, excuse me, guys. So if any Australian goes to a pub, it's schnitty. So I pronounce it like SCHITTY. but it's just a chicken schnitzel like what you guys would get when you go to like an Italian like restaurant. You have like the cheese, the tomato sauce, the chicken, and the salad. But it's a classic pub food that I thought we haven't brought up yet. What's yours this week, Matty? Is it
tell
food
them
related?
what a palmy is as well. Tell them what a palmy is. It's
Well,
a build on a shitty.
Yeah, it's like it's schnitzel with the sauce and cheese on top.
Yeah, tomato sauce.
And then you might get ham, you might get pineapple. You can pretty much do whatever you want, but it's a classic. It's just if you're hungry and you don't know what to get, just grab a schnitty.
And with the Parmigiano ones, so that's what we're talking about, chicken palmy there, chicken Parmigiano. It's like the Neapolitan sauce, the Italian Neapolitan sauce. And then some pubs will have extras, so they'll put like chili on it, so it's like really hot. Or they'll put like, you can get a Hawaiian palmy. I make them at home all the time because I'm celiac, so I got to crumb my own chicken with like corn flour and stuff like that. But you put like a Hawaiian one is like the Neapolitan sauce, and then you have pineapple, you have ham and cheese over the top. It's beautiful. You know, my flatmate once, Mark, made before I moved in with my partner, my fiance, he made one that had a chicken palmy sandwich, and the bread was garlic bread.
Yeah, that's heavy. That's a
big meal. That's a big meal. So my slang word for this week, it's a bit more NFL general related, but Dak Prescott signed a massive deal this week, and I thought, it's a good one. Dax. So we call trousers over here. We call them Dax, right? So, you know, there's a game that some teenage boys, I guess, like to play in high school where they go around and like try and, you know, pull the shorts down someone else to, you know, expose them in the playground or whatever. They used to call that dacking someone. You know, equally sweatpants, we call them trucky dacks. So you might merging tracksuit pants with Dax there, and you get trucky Dax. So, so I just thought this week with Dax that I'd have a look at Dak.
Yeah, is that how you spell trucky Dax? Is it like what? Who? You know what? Every time I do this segment, who are we?
I know. We sound like we're off with the fairies, mate.
What kind of people say tracky Dax for? Or do they call them long johns too, like for sweatpants?
Nah, long johns are like the thermals, aren't they?
Okay. Still though, like tracky Dax for sweatpants. Where are we from? Are we from this planet? Like, it's unbelievable. Some of the words that we can come up with because we're so lazy. Yeah, just go and grab your tracky Dax, mate. You'll be right, mate. Like, what is going on?
It's a classic, mate. It's a classic. But look, let's move on to the next segment. So as we said, we want to get a bunch of questions in, so get ready to fire away on those. But before we get into that, Mark, drafts coming up. As you said to me before we went on air, it seems that everyone's got a different person that they want to pick. You know, how are you feeling about the draft coming up? We know that Steelers got a compensatory pick in the 4th round this week. That was confirmed. Yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts because we've missed you the last couple of weeks.
Basically, I'm still on the same train. I just want to see someone with the O-line, and another reason being fix the O-line up. And I really want to try and watch the O-line this year because of what Dotson said, you know, in that interview with NFL.com. I want to see how they can be maulers up front and see what they can do. So, yeah, we might have is Al going to be there? Do we have Dotson? Who's in the center? Do we have DeCastro? And who would be our right tackle? Will it be Zach Banner? So those 5 guys, if we get another O-line guy who can be that depth guy, who's going to provide that upfront grunt, I think that's what we need.
So Thaddeus asked, "What does shut your gob mean?" in the live chat.
I read that while I was talking. I'm like, Matty, what are you doing?
That's what I mean, and that's why I brought it up. Thaddeus, we're not saying to you to shut your mouth. That's the answer to your question.
These are our mates, Matty. Don't be yelling at them.
What a classic. So we just wanted to confirm that we didn't mean that directly at you. That's literally what shut your gob tells you to shut your gob means.
Oh, that's probably one of the best things I've ever seen. Yeah, but I reckon, okay, I don't know who it's going to be on the O-line, but I think someone's going to be there for the next, whoever here's another question though. So are we drafting this O-line for Ben or a guy who can play the future, QB? Who are these players in this draft? Is it for Ben or is it for someone else? What do you reckon?
Mark, that is a great question, and I think it's one that we definitely need to address deeper as we go on, and perhaps we even get we get one of the other BTSC guys on to get their thoughts about this one. But it's such a great question because you look at what Dotson does, for example, in that O-line and the power that he provides in that game, and how different that is from the rest of the Steelers O-line, and the Steelers O-line that was put together for a Le'Veon Bell and a Ben Roethlisberger, very pass protection focused. You then look at what a Matt Canada offense looks like, and whether you want more power or agility in that blocking game. And I think this is one of those things that we're not really going to truly know the answer for several years in terms of bringing Big Ben back for 2021 and what that meant to the Steelers. Because, as you say, if they draft a bunch of pass protection guys, well, great. That helps Ben in 2021. And obviously we need to be all in on trying to win a Super Bowl, and particularly in Ben's last year. But equally, where does that set that franchise up, going forward? And so if you are going to pick O-line with a few top picks in this draft, you want to pick guys that are melding to Canada's offense that will still protect Ben this year, but that, as you say, they can support that future quarterback. We know the quarterback position is changing. There are very few, teams are not going to be drafting high quarterbacks from now on that don't have a mobility game. So if you're purely going to be pass protecting in the offensive line, you may have problems getting picked up, with a high round in the NFL if you're an offensive lineman coming through. So this is a fantastic question, Mark. And I don't think it's one we're going to really understand until.
Are you there, Matty? We lost Matty for a little bit. Oh, Matty might be having his dog barking, yelling for a treat or two, or talking about the Steelers.
Sorry, he ran into the room there, and it was quite loud through that microphone. So yeah, but what I was saying is that we don't necessarily know what that's going to be. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. That's a really great question, Mark.
Well, we're still stuck in that, and it's a very similar thing to this whole show. We're still stuck in that transition period of are we going to be mediocre? Are we going for Super Bowl? What are we going to do for this year? And a lot of it does rely on Big Ben and who we're going to draft for Big Ben, or in the future, what QB will come in, and what's our identity going to be for the next 2 to 5 years. It's very interesting to say the least.
That's it. But Mark, there was also a question that was brought up on the Scobro show last week of what position would you be furious with if the Steelers, didn't drafted that player? Is there a particular player that you'd be upset with if the Steelers drafted, or a position?
You know what? The probably the biggest thing I would say would maybe be a receiver reaching that high in the first round, possibly. Maybe you could find a receiver in the back end, or someone like that, someone like a skilled player. I think at this time and need at the moment, we do need those grunt guys to set the standard. I think with Big Ben at quarterback, we don't overly need a receiver in the next 3-5 years once Big Ben is gone. So we need someone to solidify that O-line, get that ready, or you need someone who's going to be on the defense, who's going to help out TJ and help those guys out and help out Bush. So I think if they were to stretch and get a receiver, what's the overall point? Because it's only one little part of the game, but you've got to fix that O-line, which it says everything for everything else. Who did you say last week on with Dave?
Yeah, so this was on the Scobro show, and I was listening to that. I didn't get to listen to that live, but I said quarterback. I don't want to see a quarterback drafted at number 24 because there's none of the top quarterbacks are going to fall that far. And if Justin Fields is falling at 24, then that tells you that he's probably not worth that first round draft pick. I look at Mike Sirianni there, and he sort of says corner round 1, and this is a really interesting question because what if JC Horn, who's apparently the top, a top 3 or 4 cornerback in this draft, or a Greg Newsome, who ran a really fast time. I think it was a 4.38 40 the other day, unofficial. What if they're sitting there in round 1? But equally, if you're bringing back Hayden, which they should, and I like the way that we've talked about the role that he can move into. You restructure or look at extension for Nelson, and you bring back a Sutton. we can't afford a round one on a corner. If we have to cut Hayden to keep people, and I don't think they do, but in a world where they did, and you don't bring back Sutton or Hilton, well, you know what? A round one quality corner, fine. But I just don't think the top 4 or 5 corners will actually make it at the 24th pick. But I like the insight there in terms of, we know that the Steelers struggle to draft a corner in round one. So look, I think people are asking the question, so let's move full into them now. Thaddeus on the YouTube side says, Mark and Matty, if you were the GM, could you justify cutting Hayden to re-sign Dupree? I think so, because the defense really went downhill when he was injured.
Just quickly on that, I would say, I love Hayden. I think he's a great story. But I think if you were to have Bud and TJ again, that's a defense that is so hard to handle and to game plan for. So if they in a fantasy world where we had both those guys, we just have some good corners. But if you have the 2 positions on the outside rushing the quarterback, it's not game over, but it's pretty close. And it's very hard for that offense to move the ball, and they're under pressure all day. And that TJ is ready this year. He is going to come out swinging. And if Bud were on the team and they all bought in, then those 2 fellas would be something like out of the 70s. We'd be in the backfield 100% of the time. It would be scary to watch. And if they're both healthy, it would be awesome. And if you had to sacrifice cutting Hayden, then maybe you'd do it.
For me, I get the sentiment from Thaddeus, and it's a hard one to go against, to be honest, from my perspective. But where it's not hard is that Hayden offers us a lot more in terms of if he's willing to do a bit of different safety and different schemes, he's willing to do things in the slot and what have you. Equally, we've got a potentially fantastic player in Alex Highsmith. And yes, his run defense has got to improve there, because that's an area where Bud is well advanced compared to Highsmith. Obviously, Bud's athletically and the numbers that he put up when he was going through the combine are very, we're ahead of Highsmith as well. But you could go in and draft over the next couple of years an outside linebacker that, has that run defense. You can move guys around. I mean, that's one of the bonuses, for instance, in Zaven Collins, who's potentially a round one draft pick for the Steelers at linebacker, because he can play inside and outside, and you could have him crashing down on the run, and then you can switch him out with TJ Watt and Highsmith. So I think when we look at that, there's a question. And equally, as we've just talked about, and a lot of people bring up in the live chat, the Steelers can't draft a cornerback in round one. So, if we cut Hayden, we're sort of pushed into that position. So, and also it just comes down to money. I think Bud's 15 plus minimum, probably more like 18 plus. Cutting Hayden's only going to give you 7. We just don't have the cap. So as the GM, I sit there and I'm like, well, it's just not possible. What are we losing to try and get Hayden? We'll bring up Snowman, who's a super chat. It's coming standard. What Steeler would shock you if he got cut on the YouTube side? So what Steeler would shock you if he got cut? Mark.
For me, it's Vince Williams he's a free agent this year, isn't he? Or am I completely wrong?
No, so he's 1 year left, but
okay.
He could be a cap casualty, because the Steelers could save about $4 million if they cut him.
So if he is cut, I would be very shocked if that's how the road they wanted to go down. I was thinking Mike Hilton, but I think he's on the door. He might leave here and there. But I think if Vince were to go, I think he's another bloke in that locker room that needs to show some of these young guys and show Juju how to be a Steeler. There's nothing funner to watch than Vincenzo Williams running up the middle and really hammering someone. He's a guy, if they got rid of, I think he's Steeler presence. He's been there a long time. If he were a cap casualty, then I think that would shock me for sure.
Yeah, interesting. I think this is going to sound really, really different. I think the one that would shock me would be Chris Boswell. And the reason I say that is that we've got no one that, like, Matthew Wright is not an NFL quality kicker from what I've seen. And he's very accurate, but you need to be able to kick 50 plus, right? And maybe he improves through another offseason. But you look at the contract, I think they're going to look to play with Boswell's contract a bit. I think it's a restructure potentially for him this year to create a bit of cap. But he's an interesting one. He's playing it. It is interesting because he's playing at almost the franchise tag or just above. I covered this in Law Room a couple of weeks ago for a kicker. But I don't think the Steelers in this offseason want to be trying to figure out the kicking position. I think they just want solid answers at solid positions. So I actually would say Chris Boswell would be the surprise for me if they were to cut him. Also, we've got 20 free agents. So the Steelers have kind of, you're going to see less cuts than you might have, purely because we've got guys that are coming off contracts, so you just don't renew them. Yeah,
you can't cut the Wizard. The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz.
Can't cut him. I think he's a. Yeah, you don't want to create another problem, right? That's exactly what you just said. You don't just. He's good. Yes, he had a bit of ups and downs, but like we all do. There was one game last year that the commentator said he's got 35 in a row, and then they commentator curse. I'm like, why did you say that? You don't cut Boz. What's our next one from Blake here?
Yeah, so Blake Literal on the YouTube side says, who do you Yins want to be our running back next year? Free agent or draft pick, doesn't matter, but who do you want behind Ben? It's a good question. Mark, what are you feeling right now? Because there's a player that you keep throwing out there from the New York Giants.
Look, I just like him, Wayne Gallman Jr. And what I'm about this team is I just like about their heart, and if they can fall forward, and Benny Snell didn't do it. Benny Snell's got to prove to me that you can go more than 1 yard. He just didn't do it. He's probably better off just reaching his arm out and then coming back. He just didn't do anything with that O-line. I think Connor may go as well. Same with Juju. If they get rid of Connor and Juju, then maybe you start fresh and you have someone else in the running back. Use Samuels, integrate McFarland more. I think you've got to bring in a veteran presence. And I did joke about Frank Gore coming in, but someone like that. But even bringing in a guy like Goldman or who's the bloke from the Packers, Jones?
Aaron Jones.
Yeah, you can bring in a guy like that, and that's like the new face, and the new guy is going to be running behind Ben. Or even go to the draft. I think this team at the moment needs a new spark, because we kind of know how Connor runs and what's going to happen. We need something in that backfield to really help this offense push the ball forward. So I'd be happy to see a new guy in there and just something.
I like Javonte Williams. My problem with Javonte is going to be that I don't really believe in drafting a running back in round one. And I'll tell you, give an opinion on it there when we bring up what I brought up right now in terms of the live chat, in terms of Master of Puppets point. But I'm questioning whether you want to be doing that a running back in round one. But I think, and you go, fine, well, let's wait in round two for Javonte. I think Javonte will be picked up by the time the Steelers are picking up 55. So this is that conundrum, because Najee Harris, if he falls to 24, it's like, do you draft him? Question mark there. And also we might have a good tackle on the board, right? Versus if you wait till 55, Javonte's not going to be there. I mean, he's potentially the second best player in this draft there in terms of when it comes to the running back position over behind Etienne. So this is the question that I think you've got. I wanted to bring up Master of Puppets, who on the YouTube side says trade the 24th, but stay in the top 40, get an extra second or third. You'd need the extra second there. I advocated some of the trading back for this reason. A couple of weeks ago, I did it. I've got a lot of different. Most people on the BTSC contributors and editors side disagree with me on that point. And I do think will stay around that 24th pick. But you raise a good point, Master of Puppets, because there's a number of players at key positions. And in the second round, you've got potential starters there. It might be more value. The other thing, though, that it's come to my mind, and I did sort of mention this on War Room this last week, was around the first round draft picks are evolving for me in my head, because you've got the 5th year option for you. And I think the idea of this 5th year option, where you don't necessarily have to tender a full new contract, you get that 5th year without committing long term. You don't have to pay the franchise tag. That can be really, really helpful. So I think we've also got to think about that round one. What does that offer? That if that player is the right person, you get 5 years locked up, not 4, 3, or 2. So that's an interesting piece there for me, and that's why I wanted to bring it up whilst it wasn't a question. No one says, assuming QB play will go down after Ben for a while, should you draft your future bell cow Rabi this year, even if it meant round one? Again, that's a great question. I did say something similar a couple of days ago in the BTSC Slack channel where this is probably the one draft I'd be open to drafting around one running back. If it's an Etienne or a Javonte, I don't necessarily think Najee Harris with the offensive line we've got and bringing Big Ben back is going to be right. But you're exactly right, Nolan. Let's lock in a bell cow RB now where they don't have to do everything, that can then mature while the O-line gets better as well. And then you draft in the right quarterback, or you bring in a veteran, or you keep Mason and you play him out through 2022. But at least there you've got that RB that can make plays and you take the pressure off. Or you get a quarterback that actually wants to throw play action passes, because that the defense respects, because you've got a good running back that can make plays.
It's
what about you,
like
Mark?
I said to you the other day. We just need. I think we need this time. We need a guy. We need a guy like Saquon Barkley, or we need like that guy who's that face of the franchise on the offense. We have Big Ben. We need someone who will make those plays, get the first down, like Le'Veon Bell was. I know they're hard to get and they're hard to find, but if we were to find someone like that, this would change the direction of this franchise for the next 5 years. If you have someone who's an outstanding player at running back and we still have Big Ben there.
That's it. Would you draft a tight end or get a cheap veteran not named Jesse James in free agency? Look, if we can solve the tackle position in the first round, and there's a tackle worth getting there, you get Javonte in round 2. I know that questions what I've just said there, but assuming you could, I love, and I've talked about him on War Room 2 weeks ago, I love Brevin Jordan. It'd be interesting with Ebron in terms of they do similar things, but I mean, you just go get Brevin Jordan. You will not be looking back. He's, as I've said before, he's one of those guys that, this season we had no first round draft pick. 3 of our draft picks were in the top 32 when they did a redraft at the end of the season. This is one of those sorts of players I could see doing that if you went back and did a redraft in 5 years' time. So I'm open to it, but with so many needs, and this is the thing, it's where do the Steelers feel the best players are available on their boards versus the needs that we've got, and I always believe in drafting best player available, but at the same time, you do have to fill needs to a degree. Tight end's going to be one of those interesting ones. And if you've got Ebron right now, do you go after a blocking tight end? If you do, there's 6th, 7th, even undrafted guys you can get for that. So we'll have to see how the Steelers tackle that one, Chad. How about you, Mark?
I agree with you 100%. I just, like I said, I'm going through you, Matty. You're my draft expert. So if we bring in someone at tight end, listen, I just need him to block, get some running lanes open. I really just want to see them, put people on the ground and just be a big maul and run them over. Yeah, it's awesome to see tight ends have the catch here and there, but I want to see that more physical game so we can start to. And that's where you wear down the opponents and you wear down the defense. So if that's someone through the draft, 100% go for them. Maybe mold them into the next quarterback or someone like that. But yeah.
Moneybags says, and this probably will be one of our last questions, Robert Spillane signed the exclusive rights tender. Does that mean trouble for Vince? Yes and no. They do different things. I think it would be silly not to bring Robert Spillane back. I think you can bring him back at about $1 million, or even less. He was on $850 last year. Bring him back. I think Vince is his own piece. Go back, though. If you've got questions about Vince, go check out Jeffrey Benedict and Dave Schofield's Steelers Vertex article on Vince Williams. You see that he does do a lot, and he was exposed without Bush last year. I think Vince's contract is trouble for Vince, but he's a really spiritual leader in this locker room, in this defense. He'd be sorely missed. I'd miss him too. You know what, though? I'd love to see him potentially back. We talk about that run defense and, what Highsmith, potentially he needs to develop there. I'd be open to them even giving Vince a go at, on run plays, at the outside linebacker position, put him opposite TJ. I think he could do, they could do some really interesting things. So yeah, I'm open to it.
Yeah, I agree with as well. I think he's one of our leaders on the team, and he would be, like we said before, missed greatly if we didn't have Vincenzo in the middle there. He's one of the, reminds me of he's under Ferry or one of those kind of blokes. He almost needs to be there for this team, and it'd be great to see him get a Super Bowl or just something for the bloke.
That's it. And then I think what will be the final question, we'll bring it up from Snowman. And that's O-line is deep this year in the draft, so I would draft a running back. Thoughts? Well, yeah, I think we talked a little bit about running back, but the O-line is deep, but equally, we don't want to be relying on the third and the fourth round to get the future of the O-line position, or I think we're going to rue the fact that we left it that late, if that makes sense. There's going to be some regrets. But definitely round 2 could be the perfect time. Remember, we drafted Lav Bell in round 2. There's other guys we've drafted later on. Yeah, and it does come down to O-line, because you can draft Saquon Barkley, like the Giants did. But if you don't have the O-line or the guys around him where he doesn't have to do everything on his own and hurdle people to get over the first line of defense, you're going to have problems if you're relying on that.
Yeah, he got eaten up, didn't he? His first rookie year, he played really well, but the team just was trending down at the time.
But the thing about it as well is, like, I saw an article this week, and Bucky Brooks was saying from NFL.com, he was basically saying both he and Mayfield are very questionable whether they'll get their fifth. I think Mayfield will get his 5th round option activated. But with Barkley, like, do you activate that? Like, Saquon's had a bunch of injuries. Like, it's expensive at the position now. You can get RBs late. Do you really want to pay a big contract to Saquon Barkley?
It's just hard I think in this game, this physical game of football, it's hard being the running back. You are carrying the football and the load on your shoulders for the whole team. You're getting roughed up every single play. It wears and tears on their body. And that's why the running backs, 3 or 4 years is their career sometimes. And the great ones have longevity, but it's very hard he might go to another team, but it's hard to feed these blokes 30 times a game or 25 times a game and to expect that every single game and every season to be the best. Like, you look at Derrick Henry, but he's built like a machine. He's a running fridge, basically. So he's hard to stop. But like other guys, if they can get knocked up, it's one of the hardest positions that we know on the football field.
Yeah, that's it. But look, that wraps up this week's episode of Steelers Touchdown Under. Thank you, Thaddeus. You said it's a great show tonight. Master of Puppets has come back and said it's morning where they are. Apologize for the rain. It's actually bucketing down. Mark and I are about to face a week of rain, which pretty average way to close out the summer and start the autumn down here. But it is what it is. Thanks, guys, for joining us as always. For those that have joined live on Facebook and YouTube, for those listening on the audio side that have stuck with us since we started these podcasts, but just before last year when the season started, we appreciate you so much. You make it a show. Without you, as I said, Mark and I can just give each other a call or go to the pub. We enjoy that. We also enjoy being able to come to you live.
Let's go to the pub, Matty. It's only 10:30. Let's go to the pub, get some schooners.
Yeah, that's it, mate. That's it. But look, have a great evening wherever you are, or have a good day if you're listening back to this on the audio side. We'll catch you next week for the next Steelers Touchdown Under.